I was a junior in college, and 2 friends and I had heard rumors about an abandoned town in the foothills of the city near our college. We loved urban exploring and had already done some really neat stuff, so we figured why not. We packed our flashlights, black attire, and some water, then headed out. It was about 10:30 at night when we arrived. Obviously, you park far away from where you're exploring so you don't raise suspicion. It was a bit of a walk down this dark and lonely road, but finally we arrived at the gate. Now the entire town was fenced in. In the distance you could just barely make out a couple buildings fading into the dark. They were small, it seemed. However, we had to find our way in. We had heard the way in was through a tiny hole cut out of a piece of the fence on the side of the hill. To find the path there, it's across from a red house. So we wandered around the area until we spotted a red house. We just assumed it was the right one and started trucking ourselves up through thick brush, tree branches. It was a lot of work to just get in. Finally, we found the way in. It looked as though someone had sawed through the iron fence, and you're hanging onto branches or brush around you because if you let go, you'll fall all the way down the hill. We push ourselves through the hole in the fence, wipe the dirt off of our pants, and look up. There's an entire town. A market center, an apartment complex, houses, streets that branched off into little neighborhoods. We began to explore. We started towards the apartment complex, and what was that noise? It sounded like a beep. Did anyone else hear that? Beep! What is that noise? Beep! Well, let's keep walking. So into one of the apartment complexes we go. We searched around and found a mattress and some other random stuff. Okay, cool. But man, that subtle beeping keeps going off. All right, let's check out another apartment. We opened the door to the next one, and the main living room area was filled with black trench coats. Some hung up, some on the floor. We were stupidly curious, so we continued to explore that apartment. We walked upstairs, and one of the doors was completely locked. We didn't even try to force it open. We walked out a little freaked. We decided to move on and check out some other places. As we are walking outside, there are now multiple beeps coming from various locations of this part of the town. We began to realize as we walked closer to one building, a beep would grow faster and louder. We suddenly had this feeling as though we were being watched. What made us run out of that area fast was stumbling upon a decrepit old white house. In the front yard was neatly piled shattered glass formed into square shapes leading up to the front door. We knew right then something here wasn't right. As we stared at this and thought to ourselves whether or not we should check it out, a beam of light comes blaring at us through the top floor window, and the beeps grow louder and faster. We ran straight across that town. As we are running, bursts of light from various buildings light up and beam on us. It was like someone shining super bright flashlights on you. You can see yours and your friend's shadows running as fast as you've ever run before in your life. My buddy falls, of course, but he is quick on his feet to recover. Together, we assume each knows the way out. Luckily, my buddy I was following had it right. I see the hole my buddy climbs under and is out. I help my next friend out. I didn't look back, but I could tell by the edge of the light bouncing up and down as I stood still helping my buddy slide through the hole that we were being chased. I crawl under the small hole, slide down the hill hitting some branches and scratching myself up pretty good. We run quickly down that old road. It seems so dark with all the lights in our eyes and so quiet. We see the car in the distance, the beeps fading in the background. We get in it and drive away, fast. 3 months later we drove by the gate. It was torn down. We walked in and everything in the town had been demolished. There were some construction crews nearby and we asked them about the place. The construction man we talked to explained that it was a hot center for gangs. Drugs, murders, all of that went down inside, and it wasn't uncommon. The city had finally decided to just tear it down. To this day I still wonder what would have happened to us if whoever was chasing us had been just a little bit faster. There was a pond about half a mile away from my old house that I would go fishing in occasionally. It was nicknamed Derry's Pond. I still have no idea who Derry was or why it was called that. But nobody owned it, so other people would every once in a while go fishing there too. It was usually me by myself, though. I had dug a pole into the ground where I would tie a noose to and from my small kayak. I'd say it was about 2 in the afternoon when I glided out to the middle of the pond, a sweet spot for getting a decent catch. There was another person coming out from the trees. I waved at him and gave him a smile. He hopped into a small boat floating by the edge of the pond and began to row over to me. As he got close enough where trying to speak to him wouldn't come off as obnoxious, and I gave him a friendly, "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Yes, absolutely," he said with a smile. He didn't say anything after that, and I started to feel a bit awkward, as if I were obligated to keep some kind of conversation rolling now. "So, you come out here to catch some fish?" I asked. "No, I don't actually fish." "Oh, well, it's never a bad day to relax on the pond," I said. He continued to row closer to me until his boat collided with mine, making a loud thud. I was genuinely uncomfortable now. I didn't feel threatened, just creeped out. I was only 20 years old, and this guy looked like he was late 40s or early 50s. There was an awkward silence. I acted as if I was focused on trying to make a catch, but by now that wasn't even on my mind. This guy was weird. I didn't know what he wanted, and I was uncomfortable being so close to him. I felt him looking at me, or at least in my general direction, as I tried to face halfway to the opposite direction of him. I took a quick glance to my right. Yeah, he was definitely staring at me. I decided to be ballsy and lock eye contact with him. After about 4 seconds, he looked away. "So, where are you from?" I asked him. "Up there." He pointed behind himself in the direction of the woodsy hill leading past the dirt road. "Oh, you live in Chelmsford?" I asked him. No, I don't," he said. "What made you decide to come out here?" I said. "Why not?" I continued to try and uncomfortably fill the awkward silences that kept coming up. His responses were dry. He didn't contribute anything to what was barely a conversation. He just sat there, not doing anything, with half a smile on his face, looking either at me or in my general direction throughout. I was totally creeped out. My heart was racing at this point. I'd go as far as saying I was nervous for my life. We were surrounded by trees in all directions in the middle of the pond. I started to row a bit closer to land, but in a very low-key kind of way, trying to play it off as me just trying to find a better spot to find some fish. I was horrified when I saw he was following me. "What a perfect day, huh?" I felt the shake in my voice. I got close enough to the edge of the pond when I finally told the man, "I think I'm going to call it a day." I turned to see his reaction. He was still staring at me, but his smile was gone now. "I can't let you leave," he said. He lifted his flannel to expose a handgun sticking out of his jeans pocket. As soon as I could process what I was looking at, I dove out of the boat and swam for land, ran the whole half-mile uphill through the woods back to my house, and locked every door and window as soon as I made it home. I pulled down the blinds to the dining room window, leaving it open just a crack for peeking outside undetected. It started to get dark out, and I left all the lights off, still peeking out to the front yard, making sure I wasn't followed. The time came when I eventually decided I wasn't followed. I realize now, like you, that not calling the police immediately was a huge mistake. I kept my bedroom windows open to let the room air out. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I wasn't worried about being watched through the window. About half an hour after shutting the light off and falling under the covers, I heard the sound of leaves crunching from outside. I sat up to hear it more clearly. There was definitely something walking around out there. Normally I would assume it was a bear or a deer, but after what just happened I was still in paranoia mode. I sat up as still as a statue, except for my shaking out of fear, waiting as the sounds of the steps stopped. "Hey buddy, you up there? Are you trying to sleep? Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." I felt like 1,000 pounds just dropped right onto my chest. It was the same voice. I knew it instantly. I didn't make a sound. I crept out of the room, quietly downstairs to the kitchen, and grabbed the phone, practically crawling all the way to avoid being seen through the open blinds. I called 911 like I should have earlier in the temporary safety of my bedroom. I made sure to whisper into the phone, as I was still hoping he hadn't yet heard or spotted me. 20 minutes felt like an hour as I sat behind my bed waiting for the police to arrive, in constant fear that I would hear glass breaking from downstairs, or a thud on the back door, or even just the voice again from down below my window outside. The police did a thorough investigation of the property and nearby woods, turning up nothing. They suggested I stay with a friend or family member for a few days, and so I did. I never heard from or saw the man again, but I still moved a month later. I couldn't deal with the constant fear of being watched through my windows, or worse. I'll never forget this night. The pizza place I worked at was about to close, and I was getting ready to go home when the phone rang. I was working the counter alone that night, so I was taking calls. I picked up the phone. There was complete silence, so I hung up. About a minute later, the phone rang again, so I picked up again. Still silence. I was about to hang up again when I heard the very weak and cold voice of an old woman on the other end. She said she wanted a regular pizza delivered. I remained polite on the phone, but on the inside I was screaming. I just wanted to get home and end my shift. I called out to my boss that someone was requesting a delivery. He told me I had to go. I was upset at first, but I realized it was another tip, and the old ones usually tip the most, so I decided it was okay. I wrote down the address and told her it would be there soon, but she had already hung up. I thought that was rude, but I ignored it and yelled to the chef that I needed one regular. My boss told me to just go home after the delivery, as the place would be closed. So a little before 10 o'clock I got in my car put the address in the GPS on my phone. The house was 7 miles away. The GPS took me to the quiet side of town. I arrived at the house. It was a small one-story house on a very quiet and empty street. I took the pizza and walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. There were no lights on in the house. I hoped that she hadn't given me the wrong address. I rang the doorbell again. There was still no answer. I was about to give up when I turned my head and saw someone standing at the window. I got a little freaked out and backed up at first, but I eventually got closer to the window to see the person. It was an old woman, probably in her late 70s. She was just staring at me with a blank expression. I yelled at her through the glass that I had her pizza. She didn't react to what I said, so I screamed it louder. A big smile ran across her face. Not a pleasant, genuine smile. It was a smile that sent chills down my spine. I still remember that exact same face she made through the window. I decided that I was freaked out enough and got back to my car and set the pizza down in the passenger seat. I had to text my boss about this. After I shot him a quick text, I started my car, ready to get away from there. I looked to my right to see the old woman standing right outside my passenger side window, giving me the same stare she'd given me before. I put my car in drive and floored it down the street, not looking back. My boss never made me do a late-night delivery again. My sister, 7 years older than me, had moved to a small town about an hour away from the town where we grew up. She had her first place there, and we were still close. My mom was driving me to go stay Labor Day weekend with her, and I was super pumped. I was probably around 11 years old or so and couldn't wait to spend time with my older sister again. Everything was fine until we got there. As soon as I got out of the car and into the house, I got sick. I've never been car sick in my life, but something had definitely hit me and I was not feeling well at all. My mom and sister decided I should still stay and sleep it off. Maybe I'd feel better in the morning. Mom left, and I climbed into the bed on the first floor. I was a bit creeped out by it, since my sister said the bed came with the house, and that one of the original owners had died somewhere inside. I threw up a few times more before going to bed, but as soon as my head hit that pillow, I was out for the night. I didn't even hear the fireworks that were apparently very loud and went on forever. I just slept through everything. In the morning, my sister was a bit annoyed with me. "Why'd you keep coming up and down the stairs last night? If you needed something, you should have just opened the door and asked me." I hadn't been up at all that night, and I don't sleepwalk. Never have. I told her this, and that I thought maybe it was her cat. "No," she says. "I lock him in the basement at night so he doesn't run all over the place getting into stuff." We open the basement door, and sure enough, there he is waiting patiently to be let into the living room. We never did figure out who it was, but the bedroom she had been sleeping in was the only bedroom upstairs. The stairs just had a small landing with a little closet, and then her bedroom door, so it wasn't like there was anywhere else to go up there but into the room. According to her, someone was up and down the stairs several times that night. Another time I was going to a sleepover with some girls from school in another small, almost abandoned town. In the prairies there are a lot of towns like this, with old houses and few if any stores or services. Just people living close enough to a bigger town to be able to stay. This house was very old and not in the best of shape. We were all sleeping upstairs. The stairs up to the second floor were enclosed with only a door on the main floor that, when closed, hid everything completely. From the upstairs, if you looked down, it was just an enclosed staircase and you could see light under the door on the main floor. We were playing games and being kids late into the night when we heard someone coming up the stairs. We hadn't heard the door open, but we figured it was one of the girl's older brothers who lived here as well, coming to spy on us. So all of us, about 7 girls total, piled at the top of the stairs looking down. As we sat there, the sounds of someone with heavy boots or a heavy step walking all the way up the steps to the last one right in front of us continued. No one was there at all. We were all pretty freaked out about that and decided it was time to stop playing and go to bed. I was supposed to sleep on the bottom bunk of a bunk bed upstairs, but it was very narrow and tight, and the girl above me was much heavier than me, pressing down on my space even more. So I pulled the mattress out and slept on the floor nearby instead. In the morning we pulled the bed away from the wall to gain access to a hatch on the wall where we could see some pipes for heating and cooling. We were trying to debunk the footsteps we heard the night before. As soon as we started sliding the bunk bed away from the wall, the top bunk smashed down onto the bottom one. It was a homemade bunk bed with a solid metal frame that had been welded together. If I had still been laying there, I would have been seriously injured, or worse. My house sits farther back in the lot than most other houses. It's a strange layout as well. The sidewalk runs the length of the living room and ends at the front porch, which passes into the living room. Large windows that do not open allow great light to get into the living room, but at the cost of no privacy. The rest of my family was on vacation, and having the house to myself, I decided I would get drunk. Well, I pass out on the couch in the living room at about 10, when I realized I was too scared to walk back to my room. The couch is right underneath these big windows. I woke up suddenly, not knowing why. I had a severe case of the chills, and I couldn't figure out why. Then the banging started. It came from right above me. I didn't move, but I opened my eyes and looked up at the window. Someone was standing there, pounding on the glass. Without moving, I looked at the cable box. It was around 3 in the morning at this point. And the banging continues. Then it stopped suddenly, but I still didn't move. Suddenly it starts again, coming from 2 different directions now. Someone is banging on the window, and another person is banging on the front door. They kept doing it, just would not go away. Finally, after about 40 minutes, they quit. It was the most terrifying event I can recall. It made me a nervous wreck after that. I called a friend the next day to see if he would come over and stay for the rest of the week, and his response was, "What for? So that we can both be murdered in our sleep? Thanks a lot, jerk." My house is a church from the 1800s with a cemetery right out front. Needless to say, I've had a lot of creepy, scary stuff go down. All of the following situations will be tied together at the end. Here we go. One day I walked up to my room and found my phone charger disconnected from the wall beside my bed. It was under all my dirty clothes, and the wire had also been disconnected from the part that goes into the wall. I put it all back, no problem. This happened for 3 consecutive days. On the 3rd day I was putting the charger back into the wall beside my bed, but I had some trouble getting it into the wall and started hitting random numbers on my touchscreen, felt the vibrations. When I finally looked at my phone, I had pulled up the call screen and dialed 666. I was in my upstairs bathroom a few summers ago. Right outside that bathroom there is a long hallway that leads to my parents' bedroom and a spare bedroom near the end. When I left the bathroom, I looked down the hall and saw a man standing there. He looked at me for a few seconds, then he turned and walked into the spare bedroom. I ran down to see what he was doing in there, but he was gone, just disappeared. I had a dream that felt like it lasted all night long one time. The entire dream was the typical little girls in white dresses. They were standing beside my bed watching me sleep. Me and my girlfriend at the time, few years ago, heard a distinct whistle in my bedroom. Nobody was even home when we heard it. I think we heard it on 3 separate occasions. I was laying on my bed late one night after midnight with my head at the end where my feet usually are, just watching TV. Out of nowhere, the strings on my acoustic guitar strummed right next to me. I had to grab something in my room one time and sat down on my bed to read a text message. I felt an impression in the bed next to me, felt a small wind, and heard the air that would release if you flopped down on a bed, all at the same time. To tie it all together, I invested in a digital voice recorder to see if I could pick up some sounds we can't hear. I asked out loud about the whistling and got no answer, no whistle, nothing in person. Played the tape back and heard that same distinct whistle a few seconds after I asked. I then asked if they liked my guitar because I heard them playing with it. Played it back and heard a female giggle, had that dream about the little girls. Went to the room where I saw the man walking and asked if there was anyone there. All hell broke loose. I heard a grown man's deep voice respond to every question I asked. Nothing I could understand, more like grunts and uh-huhs. When I asked him to give me a sign that he's here, like tapping or something, tapping began on the TV that was in the room. So I kept asking questions and gained information through tap responses. It was pretty crazy. Haven't used the recorder since. I was kind of freaked out, but I never found anything negative that would have explained the 666 on my phone. I was probably in the 8th grade and was staying at my best friend's house. He lived in a rural area right outside of our small town. We decided that tonight would be a cool night to go out and wrap some houses because that's what 8th graders do, and asked his parents if it was cool for us to go out that night. His dad told us no, he wanted us to stay in and that we weren't allowed to leave. Well, my friend doesn't like to take no for an answer, so we snuck out at about 2 a.m. His house sits on top of a hill with a long gravel driveway that connects to the road. We made it down with a giant black trash bag of toilet paper, and just as soon as we hit the pavement, my buddy says he hears a car coming and we should get off the road. So we jumped down into the ditch along the side of the road and lay flat in the grass, and sure enough, a little while later a car speeds by. We give it a few seconds and then jump up to head on our way. That's when my friend goes, "Damn, that car is coming back." I didn't know what he was saying until I looked up, and way down the road you can see brake lights and the car turning around in the middle of the road. We dive down flat again, wondering what the hell is going on. We're both in dark clothes and it's pitch black out. It's not like we stuck out like sore thumbs. The car comes by again, slowly, but it's on the opposite side of the road this time. It drives past and we wait. My friend puts his hand on me to keep me down and looks up out of the ditch. "Dude, it's coming back again." By this time we're both nervous as hell. It's obviously not a cop car, dark-colored with no markings of any kind. And what if it's not just some concerned citizen? There's a culvert in the ditch close by, and I start to army crawl towards it. My friend tells me to be still. The car slowly rolls by and stops, right over the top of us. Then it drives off. It circles back. It drives by slowly. It stops. It drives off. I think maybe it happened twice more. After the last time, we saw it go a little ways down the road, and we jumped up, ditched the toilet paper, and sprinted up to his house. We locked the doors, set the alarms, and watched. I remember I looked out the window and saw the car, idling out by the end of his driveway. Holy crap, that was terrifying. We spent the rest of the night sitting in his living room with plastic bats and hockey sticks to defend ourselves. I get that it could have been literally anything besides a murderer, but tell that to 8th grade me. I don't believe in the supernatural or ghosts, but this all happened, I assure you. A few years ago, me and my partner were alone in her parents' house for a week, and a series of very odd things happened. One night after we'd went to bed, I woke up to use the bathroom. When I went downstairs, the cushions were thrown all over the couch, and some were piled up in the corner. Knowing my partner straightens each room before bed, it immediately struck me as odd, but I still needed to use the bathroom. I'd been sitting there a couple of minutes when I heard a loud knocking on the bathroom door. It's directly in front of the toilet, so I saw the door moving in the frame. 2 seconds, I explained to what I thought was my partner, but I got no reply. All I could hear on the other side was a rasping breath, loud and rhythmic. After I was finished, I sheepishly opened the door, and of course nothing was there. When I got back upstairs, my partner had heard the knocking and wondered what I was doing. I explained what happened and she was very creeped out. I think it was the next day we were in the living room when we heard a loud bang. It was massive, sounding like a gunshot. Immediately after, the power went off, so after I turned the power back on, we went to investigate. We found the dining room mirror had come off the wall and destroyed the power outlet below. It must have fallen vertically, but when we checked the wire that attached the mirror, it was intact, and the wall fixture was also fine. Again, this isn't supernatural, but neither of us could explain it. Over the next few days, the dining room furniture would rearrange itself, chairs often pulling out while we were in the other room. We would hear the distinctive sound of someone sitting down. We'd hear people talking in other rooms, and of course they'd fall silent as you'd enter. After that, things still happened, most often odd noises or items of furniture moving, oftentimes heavy things that take a couple of people to move ordinarily. We finally decided that enough was enough, so we moved out. Back in late 2001, early 2002, I lived on a deserted road heading out to the middle of nowhere. A narrow road with no side streets and only houses after the first few miles, and no streetlights. Bad accidents were common since people loved to race down this road. One night I was home alone with the ex when we heard another car crashing, only this one sounded strange, like a few cars wrecking. So we grab our shoes and run down to the road, and there is literally debris everywhere. A pickup truck had taken the turn too fast and ejected all 3 passengers. The multiple crashes we heard was the truck crashing to the ground after each flip. When we got to the road, the truck was all smashed up, but somehow its engine was revving, and there was smoke everywhere as if it were on fire. There were car parts everywhere, and people were laying on the road. It was dark, so it was really hard to see, but I could see the outlines of a man just sitting in the middle of the road making this horrible noise. His friend was lying there dead, so I don't know if he was screaming in pain or shock or what, but it's a sound you never forget. By that time, cops had shown up and used their spotlights on the scene, which made it worse. My mind can only recall a single image from that moment, as weird as that sounds. I can remember the guy on the road, and though I can't see his friend, I know he's next to him, and I know when all the spotlights go on the road it's a mess, but that's all I remember seeing. What I know happened is when the guys were ejected, their bodies were torn apart. So much so that police were walking around with body bags after the victims had long since been driven off. I know the scene was so bloody that the road and the pull-off in front of our driveway was stained with blood for days. And the neighbor told me I calmly stepped over remains I noticed next to me when the lights went on. But I don't recall any of it. The only other thing I remember from that night is the life flight helicopter circling overhead, and all the trees moving because it was so low. That alone is an eerie experience. Out of 3 men, 2 died on the scene. One lived and was never seen again.